The laughter started before the translation finished. It was a layered insectal chorus, echoing off the lecture hall walls. Professor Zellara tilted her crested head, letting her eyes linger on the lone human cadet. She'd asked a simple question: what do humans do for fun? She expected trivia, maybe some primitive games. Not this. Not the long, heavy silence that followed. Not the way Cadet Marcus Holley kept his hands folded, jaw set, eyes locked forward. The rest of the class, 6 different species from across the coalition, watched him like a specimen pinned to foam. The Galactic Interstellar Academy was a cathedral of glass and alloy orbiting a blue-white gas giant. This was where future diplomats and strategists were taught to civilize the galaxy. Humans had only been admitted 3 cycles earlier and on a probationary status. We were categorized as physically fragile, emotionally volatile, and culturally undeveloped. Hawley knew every word he spoke would be dissected, weaponized, or laughed at. He'd seen it happen before. Professor Zellar floated closer, her robe of living fibers rippling, her antennae twitching with smug curiosity. She gestured to the recording drones hovering above. "This is a cultural exchange module," she said, her voice smooth and sharp. "No judgment. Simply explain what your people do for recreation, for pleasure, when there is no survival imperative." Hawley swallowed, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. The Vorex clutch mines, the towering Carthan brute, the avian Trisari scholar, who'd already published 3 papers on human inadequacy. He chose his words carefully. "We compete." The room rippled with amusement. Everyone competed, even algae colonies. Zellara smiled wider. "Compete how?" Hawley hesitated, then answered, "We test ourselves against each other. Against environments. Against fear." The professor tapped her console. "Examples?" That was when the first hint of unease crept in. Hawley didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked up at the drones and said, "With your permission, I'd like to show you." The laughter sharpened. Visual aids were usually embarrassing relics, clumsy recordings of outdated rituals. Zellara waved a limb. "Proceed," she said, confident this would reinforce her lecture on human impulsivity. Hawley keyed his wrist implant. The room dimmed. The central display flickered to life, pulling not from curated archives, but from unfiltered human public records, a requirement of the Transparency Accords. The first image filled the air. A group of humans stood at the edge of a sheer cliff. The wind screamed. Their faces were wrapped in fabric, but their eyes were bright with excitement. Before anyone could comment, they jumped. Their bodies vanished into the void, only to reappear seconds later as colorful canopies bloomed above them. They were laughing, breathless, alive. The laughter in the hall faltered. Zellara tilted her head. "Risk indulgence," she said. "Predictable." Hawley didn't respond. The footage cut to frozen wastelands where humans raced machines across ice at lethal speeds. It cut to deep oceans where they dove into black water, knowing ancient things watched from below. It cut to arenas where they ran until their lungs burned while massive crowds roared. Still, the professor maintained control, narrating dismissively until the footage changed. The next scene was grainy, military-grade, time-stamped decades earlier. A group of young humans in a dirt courtyard, faces bruised, laughing as one of them tried to stand on a broken leg. Zellara frowned. "This appears to be training." Hawley nodded once. "It is," he said. "We do it for fun." The room went quiet. The footage rolled on, showing humans in simulated urban combat, tagging each other with non-lethal rounds, celebrating clever ambush, replaying their mistakes, pushing harder and harder. Then it cut again, seamlessly, to real combat. No disclaimer, no warning. A squad pinned down under fire, explosions tearing the air apart. The professor snapped, "Pause this," but Hawley hadn't queued a playback. He'd opened a live archive. The drones kept recording as the humans on screen moved with terrifying precision, communicating in clip bursts, risking their lives to pull wounded teammates to safety. Improvising, adapting, surviving. When it ended, the hall was silent enough to hear the hum of the station. Zellara recovered first, her voice tight. This is not recreation. Hawley finally looked at her. It starts as recreation, he replied. We call them games, sports, exercises. We do them because they're hard, because they hurt, because they scare us. The Trisari scholar shifted, its feathers ruffling. Why would you enjoy this? Hale's answer was simple. Because when it stops being fun, he said, it means something's gone wrong. The scrutiny intensified. Zilara pressed him about mortality rates, psychological damage, about why humans seem so obsessed with simulated death. Hale answered without embellishment. He described obstacle races designed by veterans, martial arts practice into old age, extreme endurance events where humans paid money just to suffer. And all of it was recorded, because Academy policy demanded transparency. The more he spoke, the more the room changed. Curiosity was turning into caution. The subtext was impossible to ignore. Humans rehearsed danger for pleasure. They normalized stress. They bonded through shared pain. When Zilara tried to reassert control, framing it all as a kind of pathology, Hale said quietly, Professor, you asked what we do for fun. You didn't ask why we win wars. That was the turning point. The footage shifted one last time, unbidden. It showed a coalition peacekeeping exercise from 2 cycles earlier. A joint operation where human advisors had been sidelined, their suggestions ignored. The simulation had ended in catastrophic failure. Then, the feed overlaid a parallel human-run simulation of the exact same scenario. It was run as a competitive exercise. Junior officers treated it like a game night, trash-talking, laughing, iterating on their strategy. They achieved a flawless outcome. Professor Zilara's crest flattened. She realized, too late, that the recording drones were still active. This entire lecture, her dismissive tone, her leading questions, her visible discomfort, it was all preserved. She understood the implication with a clarity that stole her breath. Humans didn't separate fun from function. They used joy as a forge, turning fear into familiarity, chaos into play. By the time something became serious to others, humans had already mastered it while laughing. The climax wasn't an outburst, but a silence so heavy it pressed on the ears. It was broken only when the Carthan Brute, a veteran of 3 border conflicts, stood and bowed his massive head toward Hale. It was a gesture of profound respect that rippled through the room. Zilara had lost control of her own classroom. When she tried to salvage the session by ending it early, the damage was already done. The footage leaked within hours. It was shared across academic networks, dissected by strategists, and quoted in official hearings. By the next cycle, Professor Zilara submitted her resignation, citing a need to reassess her biases. The resolution came quietly, without ceremony. Humans were removed from probationary status. Our training methods were suddenly being studied rather than mocked. Our presence on joint commands was increased. Harvey returned to his dorm, uncelebrated. He hadn't intended to humiliate anyone, only to answer honestly. Months later, when a coalition fleet faced an unexpected crisis, it was a human-run war game that saved them. The officers just called it practice, smiling grimly as the alarms blared. Because to them, this was what fun had always been about. And the galaxy finally learned that underestimating a species that plays at survival is the fastest way to lose. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. See you next time.